So Capita, I don't know if this is your first session with us with MindSpark Learning, but Capita is a segment of MindSpark Learning. We specialize in coaches and we develop all our content with the basic idea that coaches are as valuable as any educator, and that the training that we do works around being the coach that athletes want to play for, work for, and win for. So let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in sports. Right from the start, do you guys, Annalisa and Ray, do you both remember what this picture is in reference to?
Oh, this was the NCAA basketball tournament, the men's and the women's.
Yes. Yes. And this image, just this image and these 6 words spoke a crazy amount of volume that caused national attention to this issue, that college institutions spend 24% of their operating budget on female sports, but 84% of general sports fans have an interest in female sports. And we know that they came under fire and they corrected the issue very quickly because they came under fire. But I'm going to put you in their position. So I'm going to ask you to have a quick scribble paper and a pen and a writing utensil near you, and tell me what you would do moving forward if you were in charge of this institution's facilities. Right? You spent the money, you got the weight room because that's what they said. What would you do moving forward? Let's take about 2 minutes, get that pen, that pencil, scribble it down. What would you do moving forward if you were in charge of this organization? Okay, so I'm not going to have you guys share out that answer. But just hold on to it because it will come back when we circle back around. So this is the second issue that I want you guys to think. You're here because there's probably an equity issue that your org is facing. I want you to take a moment, and again, this is not going to be shared out, so you don't have to worry about it. It's totally anonymous, but for your own benefit on that scribble paper, what equity issues is your org facing? Think about that for a moment and write it down. If you need some guidance on there, write on the slide, think about who's being left out of your organization. Or, right, think about the people who are left out. What would they be saying about your organization? Meaning like, oh, the volleyball team, that's just for blank. Take about 2 minutes. Okay, so this is super important that you have this idea of the equity issue that your org is facing, because throughout the rest of the short session, you're going to be looking at the techniques and ideas and tools that I give you and you guys collaborate on with the frame of reference of how am I going to solve this and how can I continue to create solutions for these types of issues. So let's talk about the goal. Check it out. So right here, we want to understand the root causes that are creating barriers for access for different communities into different athletic practices. And what we want to do is change those practices. Because if we change those practices, there's a lot of benefits that we'll have access to. Some of them you could see in the result of the benefits of having different athletes. You can have a multidisciplinary athlete, right? You have an athlete who's not just good at basketball, but they're also good at ballet. And they bring those movement ideas and a different mindset to those practices. You have a broader range of problem solving if you have kids from different neighborhoods, right? Kids in this area and this age group solve problems this way, but a kid from this area that you might be overlooking in this age group might have a totally different perspective on how to solve this problem. So you have richer ideas and you have richer thoughts. And you have an opportunity to redefine what the traditional athlete in that sports look like and give hope to different communities, right? Oh, a wrestler looks like this and he has this skin color and he's a he, but that's not a guarantee. So this is the point and intention of this work. Let's talk about equity in athletics. What are the benefits of bringing more equity into athletics? And this is kind of just open. You could unmute yourself. You could just drop it in the chat. I see all of you, so we're all here together. This is a communal.
Well, I think whatever you are moving towards, the more diversity you have, the better the sport becomes, or the better, you know, if it's even if a different organization, if it's politics, right, it becomes more diverse. Politics becomes better. Political participation becomes better. Since we are focused on athletics, I would say different people bring to it different strengths.
Yeah, can I dig a little bit deeper in that, Annalise, and say, like, what kind of strengths are you thinking about when you think about like a different type of athlete or a different type of person?
Well, you know, I'm just going to go with I'm a very short Latina woman, right? So there are things I'm going to excel at and other things that I'm not going to excel at. But you know, I guess as a natural ability. But you know, being smaller would help me in rock climbing, for example, right? And so someone from the outside might say, well, she's not very athletic looking, but let's get her on that mountain and maybe she'll do something.
I love that. I also love the idea of like weaknesses becoming strengths. This is going to show how old I am, but I don't know if you guys remember Muggsy Bogues. He was a basketball player back in the day. And, you know, the idea of a basketball player, you expect, oh, you got to be 7 feet. You got to be 6'10". I think he was 5'3". So I don't know how tall you are, Elizabeth, maybe similar in height. And he's a professional basketball player, right? But he couldn't do the things that the big men do. So he had to find different ways to play and change the game to adapt to his style. And that also gave kids who were shorter, like, hope for being in the NBA. Oh, maybe I can be in the NBA even if I'm not 7 feet tall. Any other ideas anyone wants to add on? All right, cool. Let's keep it moving. But there's something very important to highlight too. There's always been inequity in athletics. There's always been. There are certain sports that, because of the way we believe someone's not made for this sport, right? A woman's not supposed to run, or this type of person can't play hockey, or this type of person can't do this. But I would say that, did you know that a lot of these stereotypes are steeped in the idea of people having access to these sports? So I would argue that this type of person isn't good at this sport simply because they haven't had enough time or access to it. And that's why we believe this person can't do it, or this group of people can't do it. And I think that's where a difficult piece of work comes in. And that's this idea that the responsibility that we have to take. Oh, wait, I skipped this. All right, so let's agree. Let's agree there's stereotypes in sports, right? You can't see the snowboarder, but what race would you guess they are? Go ahead. I mean, we came to do difficult work, right? We came to embrace this idea. We came to talk about it, and we didn't come to halfway talk about it.
I would say Caucasian or white.
Yeah. And you know what? Sorry for my slides. You would be right, Ray. That's 66% right there. That's Caucasian or white for this snowboarder. So no discerning attributes of this snowboarder. Could be anyone under that. But if you took a bet and you were in Vegas, you would have pretty good odds on that one, right? But let's examine this, Ray. Why? Why would you guess that? Why did you guess that?
Yeah, I mean, my background, you know, it's not a sport that was introduced to me. It wasn't a sport. You know, I really didn't participate in winter athletics.
Yeah.
So for me, that was something that I was never introduced to. It's not something that I was around, even though I worked at a ski shop in college, but that's another story.
That's ironic. That's really ironic.
Crazy ironic.
From New York?
I'm sorry?
Are you also from New York?
Yeah, I've lived my whole life in New York, different area,
Look.
different parts of New York, but
Yeah, and same for me. I've never been snowboarding. I live in Colorado now. And there was something that even when I wanted to consider snowboarding, there was like some childhood voice in there that was like, that's not for you, right? Like, we don't do that. But that's not to say that we couldn't be great at snowboarding. It's just that we had barriers to access. Things like, how do we get to a mountain? How do we afford the equipment? How do we find people who are doing it as well, who are like us, that make us want to stick with the sport? All these are barriers for access to the sports and whatever activities we have. And let's talk about these possible, let's talk about these benefits. Can you guys see these slides all right too? Can you read them well enough? So there's 3 different benefits of a diverse athlete that I wanted to highlight. And I want you to take a moment to look them over and then just say which one is most interesting to you. Carolyn, I just saw your comments in the chat. I love it. Yeah, please add to the chat too if you'd like. But yeah, definitely tell me which one after reading the slide is most interesting to you. Annalisa, I see you put 2. Good point, Ray. I see you did 3. Oh, we got 1 of each. Thanks, Carolyn, too. All right, these are great things to think about. And there's no reason you have to choose just one. I just wanted to direct your focus on an interesting, on these 3 different ideas, but all 3 of these are benefits for you. My next point that I want to tell you all is that we are not just victims in this situation. We are also people who uphold these stereotypes. And the difficult work involved in this is acknowledging that we contribute to these biases. And one way that we do that is just, there's such thing as recruitment biases, right? This idea that, oh, this person will be good for this job or this task or this sport because they look, act, or whatever it is like this. It's ingrained in us. And we have to engage in this challenging work of fighting back what a typical athlete in our field looks like. We have to consider the way that we recruit athletes in general. Are we recruiting the wrestling team from the video game club and only getting boys because of that? Because there's no girls in the video game club? How are we reaching our athletes? Is it in multiple languages when we recruit them? Are we missing out on missed talent because we're not selecting from a wide enough pool? So on that paper that you scribbled on, I want you to ask you again, what recruitment biases do you think that you have in your athletic field or in your field? And you could just add to it there. And whenever you're done, just give me a thumbs up. And when I see those thumbs up, I'll move on. All right, cool. Hopefully you got that down. That's going to come to serve you as we continue to practice these ideas. And I'm going to give you a practice in this first idea. So here's a problem that you might that potentially someone could face. So in a more affluent area, a golf course owner is struggling to find new youthful interest in the sport. What can they do? So I want you in groups, take some time, get to know each other, get to talk to each other, and think about how you would solve this solution and how you can create more inclusion through your solution, right? So golf definitely has a connotation about who golf is for and who golf isn't for. But how can you create more inclusion and do right by the golf course owner? See if you could create a win-win solution. I'm going to say about 4 minutes in a breakout room together. And then we'll come back and talk about the solution that you all generated. Any questions before I put the 3 of you in a breakout room to get to know each other and problem solve this? All right, cool. Let's do it then. 4 minutes in a breakout. Welcome back, you all. Hopefully you got some time. Oh, I already see Annalisa smiling about something. That's great. Hopefully you guys got some time to talk about the idea, the practice problem to get our brains working in this inclusive and kind of like equitable solutions. Let me guide you through this one idea for like 3 minutes, and then let's see if your solution matches up with the idea that I'm suggesting. So we at MindSpark and Capita talk about this idea of equity-centered design thinking, which is kind of, it's a combination of approaches. So equity work is the idea of kind of bringing people together to create more equity, right? And then designing, but without like proper designing, you're just going to get more people of this minority at this company who then end up quitting because it's just like, hey, hire these people. And that's not what we want. And design thinking is a software approach designing to solve problems around inequity. And in order to do that, there's a kind of process we follow. And you could see it right here. Check out these stages before I speak to them for like 15 seconds. So what you'll notice about this process when you look at it is that it's a pretty intentional one. It's not just, hey, I'm going to come up with a problem. There's a lot of empathy involved in understanding this. So first you have to notice what's happening, right? And this is something like, my team has no female athletes. Then you have to empathize. You have to begin to think about the female athlete. Why am I missing out on female athletes? Why are they not joining my team? And then you have to define, oh, maybe they're not joining my team because of how I'm recruiting people for the wrestling team. Then you ideate, you come up with an idea. I'm going to post flyers. I think I'm going to try to post flyers and have female athletes featured as athlete of the week. Then you prototype it, right? You try it out and you test it and you get results. Oh, did I get more female athletes or not? And then you reflect. How did I do? What could I do better? And the beautiful thing about this is that I feel like we use this with teachers and educators all the time, but this is actually this is such an athletic process. This is what you do when you try to shoot a ball. You shoot, you think, oh, what did I do wrong? You try to adjust. You shoot again and you try it out, and then you try again. And this is perfect for athletes, and this is perfect for people with athletic mindset, coaches, athletic directors, because it's all about trying something, modifying it, and then doing it again. And one idea involved around this is that in order to just try something, you have to get to the root cause of it, right? It's not just, I don't have enough female athletes on my wrestling team because they don't like me. It's what's really at the cause of this. Take a moment to check out this graphic. So you could see with every issue of equity and bringing more representation to our athletes, or politics like Annalisa mentioned, or anything, it's not just a problem of hiring this person or getting them on the team. It's why am I missing these people, and how can I really accurately speak to this issue? So now, tell me your guys' solution that you came up with, or solutions.
Well, Carolyn started us out by just basically saying, it's about getting these kids to the golf course and making sure that they have the proper equipment. And then Ray flipped that over and said, we need to go to them. It's not about bringing them to the golf course. It's about taking someone over to them and actually working with them. And I think both were really just incredible ideas, because of you just want to meet them where they're at, right? And so you want to make sure that you're providing what they need. In Carolyn's example. And then for Ray, it was basically like, make it even easier, right? And make sure, I think eventually you do have to get to the course though. So I think you have to look at both of those as possible solutions.
So well said. Yeah, so well said. Yeah, and great collaboration between the three of you. Yeah, I think that even without saying it, which is why I didn't want to reveal the solution, you all were thinking about the root cause, right? How do we get them in there? How do we get them invested? How do we say, hey, you know, you guys just don't get to the golf course one day? There's so many solutions to this idea. One solution that I came up with was right here, right? So you get the benefit of allowing the golf course owner saying, hey, let me bring some football athletes to play golf here, right? And with that, you get a multidisciplinary athlete. Now you have a football athlete learning to swing with precision and have this bodily control that they might not have from football. And maybe they start liking it. Maybe they start liking it and they work out some deal with the owner, and then the owner gets some new youthful interest in the sport. Maybe on Friday on an off day some of the teammates are going to be like, hey, you know what? Let's kind of like relax and play some golf. And this is the kind of idea where it's not just getting equity and it's not just giving one group a handout or this or that, but creating these win-win type solutions where everyone benefits. I'm going to give you all another one. There's been several arguments about the Indian community using your team's field to play cricket before your team's practice. Same thing. What are you going to do to create a solution that's inclusive and where the most people can benefit? We'll do breakout rooms about 4 minutes again, and I'll put it in the broadcast. Any questions? All right, let's rock. Welcome back, y'all. Talk to me. What were you thinking about with the cricket field?
We had questions, Sam,
Oh,
just when we got to breakout.
yeah.
about context, I think. So that's how our discussion went a little
Well, let's
bit.
bring
Like,
it up.
I think, yeah, like we didn't know like what the actual, like what's the root of the arguments, you know, what caused the arguments? Is it like a conflict of usage or time, or you know, is the Indian community like just refusing to let school kids play? I don't know.
I also brought up, like, I wasn't sure, like, you know, are they messing up the field? You know, what, you know, are they leaving? You know, there's so many different, you know, factors. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I could have been more clear, but also I think that it could be any and all of those things, right? That's the realistic approach, right? They could be damaging the field in a way that's difficult for your sport, or they could be, you know, going 5 minutes or 10 minutes too late each time. But when you guys started to gear towards solutions, what were you beginning to like brainstorm around?
I think maybe it's just, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just being more aware of what you don't know, right? So also taking into account like why, you know, if it is a question about time, who's to say one group is more entitled to the time than another group, and why we might think that. But also just knowing, like, and I honestly don't know that much about cricket, so you know, I could go in saying like, well, what are their needs, and is there another place, you know, for either one of us? You know, maybe there's a more a better place for them to practice. Are we not? Oh, really? I didn't know that. So Carolyn just said it could go on forever. So just knowing more about it. And so it might be a solution that, oh yeah, it would be great not to be playing in this area. We don't want any time constraints, you know, can you help us find an area, you know? So it's really just asking questions and learning more about the needs of both groups.
And I would also say too, like, knowing, you know, cricket is usually, it's actually I lived in an area where there was they used to play on Sunday mornings, and they would just look for an open space. So the question could be, like, as I said, you know, in our breakout room, you know, they may not just be aware of the schedule. So maybe it's that opportunity to start that conversation, start that dialogue of, hey, we have no issue with you guys being here. Just understand that, we have practice at this time. Could they come earlier? I mean, if you really even wanted to get more creative, cricket and baseball are very similar. But it didn't say baseball. I just assumed it just said team, so it could be any sport. But usually cricket just looks for an open space. So I would think it's just a matter of maybe the communication of just letting them know when it could be accessible to them.
Yeah, those are all good points. And yeah, honestly, I'm kind of glad it was a little bit ambiguous, because I think if it was just the time or just the field, then your solutions wouldn't be as broad. I also think that there's a rich opportunity here to create an inclusive win-win, like what resources, and I think that's where it calls where Annalisa was talking about, like asking questions and figuring out needs. Does the cricket, yeah, maybe there's one solution where we could just, get rid of the cricket team and have another space and they do that there, but what can our athletes stand to learn from them? How can can they and their community help us fundraise within their community if we allow them to use the field a little bit longer? Like, what opportunities are there to create these kind of collaborative solutions where everyone can benefit and we have like inclusiveness instead of just saying, all right, you do this over here and we do that over here. I would, before I release you to work on your own solutions together and things like that within your own organizations that start to brainstorm, I would challenge you to challenge your bias and break the mold. And the reason for that is because some of the most terrific athletes are people who have been forced to break the mold. No one would have thought that a stocky Filipino boxer would become one of the best boxers in the world. No one 10 years ago or 20 years ago would have thought about how Steph Curry has redefined the game. And I think that these things are good for the reason of representation. I think these things are good because they force people to think differently, right? When you're Manny Pacquiao, you have to think differently. And also, I think it makes you a better coach and athletic director because you have to coach differently, right? Because there's this idea of like, hey, if you have a 7-foot tall guy, hey, stand by the basket and put it in the basket. But that's not a great test of your coaching ability. A great test of your coaching ability is finding an athlete that forces you to think different about the game, that forces you to come up with different solutions, that forces you to accommodate in some way. And that's where the real growth is, when you break molds. So let's engage in this difficult work together. You've had some time to think about it in the beginning, but I want to give you another moment. I'm going to ask you for your issue, and we're going to post it on this anonymous Jamboard that's going in the chat right now. And I'm going to ask you to post it, and your name won't be attached to it, but we're all going to work on it together. And the reason for that is because no one has this figured out. We all have assets and ideas and strengths from our different backgrounds, our different cultures, our different ages. And if we're going to engage in these issues and come out on top, we're going to need everyone. So if you click on that Jamboard link in the chat, you'll see a screen that looks like, let me do this again. That looks like this. Nope, that's not it, right? This is the one I want. Are you guys seeing this?
Yep.
It looks like a sticky note.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So you have these sticky notes here, and if we're in person, just imagine it'd be a bunch of sticky notes on the board, and all you do is you click this this thing here that says sticky note, and one will come up, and you'll say something like, "My equity issue is that I have no athletes of color." And you'll drop it right there. You'll hit save and it'll come right there, and you could change it and mess around with it. Again, it's anonymous, but we're all going to work on this together, and everyone has an issue that they're working on. So I'm going to encourage you to take a minute or two and just drop your sticky note in there, and we're all going to work on each other's solutions, bringing our own mindset and skills to it. I think we just need one more. Okay, with that in mind, now we're going to do something called a brain to storm. And what that means is it's quantity over quality. Again, we have these different mindsets, and we're going to come up with as many sticky notes to these solutions as possible. Don't think about whether it's good or not, because when you think about whether it's good or not, you start judging your ideas, and you don't know what ideas are going to hit for you or for the person who needs them. So for the next 3 minutes, as many sticky notes as you can, try to solve every one of these issues, and then just throw it by that sticky note. I'm going to join in with you guys. Ready, and 3 minutes starts now. Okay, we are done. Whew, that used my brain power. That used a lot of it. But I find these types of things really rewarding. Let me see if I could. Thank you, Carolyn, for the thumbs up. Let me see if I can find the right screen. Okay, cool. So we brainstormed, right? We took these ideas. Now, again, I want you to kind of like take these solutions that we all worked on together and take a moment, just like a minute or so, and look at them and kind of take each idea seriously. What if I did do this? And take a moment to see what you can come up with.
I think one of the interesting things here is that they're all very similar. They might stem from sort of the same problem, and that these solutions can definitely overlap on all these different problems and help solve them.
Ooh, I like that. What do you think when you say that? Which solution?
Well, just like looking at, no athletes of color compared with socioeconomic backgrounds, lack of resources, it kind of all goes hand in hand. So they can all maybe use the look at the teaching and coaching interns, the food transportation solutions there. So I just feel like, or even like just awareness campaigns for these things. Like all of them could probably benefit from just getting the word out there that they exist and they do need resources.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of them are similar, and a lot of them are also specific in the way that you have to talk to the community. You can't just be like, oh, you guys don't have money? Here's money. The solution's solved. That's not going to solve the root cause, right? You have to figure out, is it transportation? Is it my mom's working and I have to watch the kids at the time when practice is? Do you come up with an alternative practice time or a flexible practice schedule? Things like that can only be figured out once you figure out what those barriers to access are. And this is what I would call the next and final piece of this is, I'm going to say take a moment and instead of sharing out, I'm going to call a quick audible and just say, what part of this are you going to focus on with the ideas of your solution? So think about, oh, maybe I need to define my solution a little bit more. Oh, I have the idea that I'm going to do, and I'm just going to prototype it. So take a moment and think about where you're at in this process, and then we'll do some closing thoughts and finish up. Okay, I'll say just one moment I think we have time for just one share out. Something that you just noticed where you're at in this process, or something you're going to try. Maybe something, a sticky note that someone gave you that made you think in a certain way.
I think I'm kind of between prototype and test right now. And one of the suggestions I definitely have considered, I think the difficult part is figuring out how to implement it during, the most challenging times I think we've experienced academically and athletically. So I think that's the one piece. I think I'm between prototype and test. It's just a matter now of how can I implement it effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and thank you for speaking on that, Ray. And as a reminder, the thing that I like is that it is prototype, right? You rarely are solutions perfect for anything that we do ever, right? It's you try it and you're like, oh, well, that could have been better if I did this or that, and then you try again, and that's good modeling for your athletes too. So, in closing, how have we learned to create opportunities and reduce barriers? I want to talk about, actually, I want to jump ahead for one last second and then jump back. But just as a reminder, some of the ones that we talked about, barriers for access to our athletes, we talk about styles of recruitment, right? Are we making flyers when really students are on social media? Are we reaching girls in their activities and this different group in their activities, or are we just getting a certain type of athlete? Are we handling transportation barriers, right? Are people not going to snowboarding because they can't get to the mountain? How can we solve that issue? Do we have an economic barrier with funding, right? Oh, this student wants to play this, but they can't get the gear. How can we restructure the fees for that? Is it an issue of supervision? Can we utilize parents or people in the community? Is it an issue of food? How can we leverage the community in that way? So here's our closing. How we learn to create opportunities and reduce barriers. And you could just drop it in the chat. Yeah, and Lisa, you're totally right. And I think that we could only find those answers once we legitimately empathize with someone, once we sit down and talk to them and really get to know them and what issues they're facing. Yeah, Ray, that's excellent. Yeah, we really have to be brave. And that kind of takes me to this last point, right? We all have blind spots and we have to acknowledge that no matter what background we are, we have biases. And there are people that we're leaving out of this table. And those are the people who could be the ones helping us to our next breakthrough or breakthrough for them. So acknowledging that we have those biases and that we're going to keep recruiting we're going to keep changing to find those blind spots, and leaning on other people to help us is essential to the work. And you all did a great job of engaging with that. And I appreciate you all for that. The very last question, and then I think we'll be done in 1 minute late, if that's okay with you, that I want you to think about is how could you implement this style of thinking within your organization? Because you're just one person. But it's going to take a whole group of people to solve these issues, no matter how smart and talented and driven you are. So the thing that I would encourage you to think about as we leave is, how are you going to get other people to see a viewpoint that values inclusivity, that values seeing people of all different backgrounds represented, or reaching out to other different backgrounds to get more representation? How are you going to change the minds and hearts of people that you work with? And with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us. Again, thank you for engaging in this work. Thank you for doing difficult things.